There was a machinist in Kenosha, Wisconsin, who walked into the Eagles Hall on a Saturday night in 1958, not knowing a single face in the room. He was not a big man. He made $41 a week and owned one suit, pressed thin at the elbows, with a felt hat he kept brushed. By the time the band took its first break, the prettiest girl at the table by the window had turned her chair around to face him, and the three fellows who had been circling her all night were standing by the punch bowl, trying to work out what had just happened. I knew him a little, years later. He told me once he never said anything clever to a woman in his life. He did a handful of small things, the same way every time, and he did them like he meant them. That was the whole trick, if it was a trick at all. And every one of those things is gone now, or close to it. What these men had was a way of making a woman feel she had been chosen out of a crowded room, and they did most of it on a dance floor, because that was where a man and a woman actually met and sized each other up. Then rock and roll came in. Around 1960, a dance called the twist arrived, where the partners no longer touched or held each other at all, and by 1965, the partner dance was finished in most towns. The one place a man had learned to win a woman face to face went dark with it. Most of what I am going to show you, you will recognize. But number 2 is the one that decided whether a woman remembered a man or forgot him by morning, and I want you waiting for it. The very first one pays off fast because it was the doorway to all the rest. And number 1 is the thing every other habit on this list was only ever a way of reaching. These were never tricks for getting a woman into bed. They were the things that made an ordinary man worth choosing. Number 30, and it is the doorway, so we start here. He asked her to dance, and then he led. A hand laid light at the small of her back, a half step that told her where the two of them were going next, so all she had to do was follow and trust it. A man learned that with his own mother and his sisters in the kitchen before he ever tried it on a stranger across the dance hall floor. It looked like nothing, that little pressure of a palm, but it told her in about 8 seconds whether he could be steady and sure without making a show of it. When the dance floor closed a few years later, this was the first thing left with nowhere to happen. My father stood up when she came to the table, number 29. Any woman, his wife or a waitress or the neighbor girl, come to borrow an egg, he was on his feet before she got there. He never once explained it. Number 28. He caught her name on the first pass and used it the way she said it, not as Miss and not as Honey. Dale Carnegie built half a book on this back in 1936, the line about a person's own name being the sweetest sound there is, and the working men who never read a page of it had run that same experiment 10,000 times on their own. Why do you think she leaned in a little the second time he said it? There was a habit so common nobody had a name for it. The man walked on the street side of the sidewalk between her and the gutter, and the splash from a passing truck hit his trouser leg instead of her good dress. That is number 27. She never even clocked why she felt looked after. She just did. Number 26. He took his hat off the moment he was talking to her, a felt hat lifted clean off the head and held down at his side, the hair underneath flattened in a ring. A grown man making himself a touch more bare and a touch less certain in front of her. The ice in the stairs is number 25. He offered his arm. A foundry hand named Sully I knew in my 20s did this for his wife on their porch steps for 50 winters, long after she could have made it down fine on her own. He held the arm out, she took it, and the two of them went down together like it was a thing they had agreed on once a long time ago and never had to discuss again. Number 24. He held the door and did not look around to see who had noticed. The man who held the door and then glanced about for a little credit had missed the whole point of it. Number 23 is the one a young man dreaded, and it taught him more than any other. He asked to call on her, and he asked the people around her first. When I started courting around 1959, you did not just take a girl out the door. You came to the house. You sat in the front room and made talk with her mother while the girl finished getting ready, and her father looked at you over the top of his newspaper, deciding things about you that he did not say out loud. I will be honest with you, half of that ritual was pure theater. and her father knew it as well as I did. A boy sweating in a borrowed tie was fooling nobody. But I came home from those front rooms knowing the people who loved her, knowing the smell of her mother's kitchen and the sound of her father clearing his throat, and she came away knowing I was a man who would sit still in a hard chair and let himself be measured. A picture show in the dark never told a girl half as much about a fellow as 1 hour in her own front room did, with the people who knew her best sitting right there reading him. That was the genius of it, buried under all the fuss, and we tore it out without ever once asking what it had been holding up. Number 22, he wrote to her in his own hand, on real paper, the date up in the corner, his own crooked letters slanting downhill across the page. A girl could keep a letter. She could take it out and read it again on a cold Tuesday in February when he was 40 miles away on a work crew. Try keeping a telephone call in a shoebox under the bed for 40 years. Now this next one separated the men who were merely polite from the men a woman could not stop thinking about. Number 21. He remembered the one small thing she mentioned once and never thought he had heard, the name of her baby sister. The flower she said she liked at the church social said in passing halfway to something else. A brakeman in our town named Ed brought a woman a single stem of the exact flower she had named 6 weeks before, and she told my mother later that it was the listening that undid her, not the flower. He had been paying attention at the very moment she was certain no one was. Number 20. He asked her about herself, and then, the rare part, he waited for the answer. You have sat across from a man who asked you a question with his own next sentence already loaded behind his teeth. Everyone has. The men who got chosen did the opposite, and it felt almost unsettling how rare it was even then to have a man's patience handed to you whole. He took her last few words and gave them back to her as a question. Number 19. She would say she was thinking of leaving the typing pool, and he would say, leaving the typing pool, and then go quiet and wait for the rest. The next one looks like coldness until you have watched a man do it right. Number 18. He left a respectful foot of air between them and let her close the rest of it herself. He did not loom in a doorway or crowd her up against a wall at a party. Look at a man tonight in any town in this country. He is 71 years old, sitting in a waiting room at the clinic, and a girl at the desk who could be his granddaughter calls his first name across the room like the two of them came up together. Nobody stands when he walks in anywhere now. Nobody crosses a room to reach him. He spent 50 years being the kind of man who delivered a woman safe to her door and waited for the latch, and the world he lives in today does not even have a word for what that was. That is the ache running under every one of these. The rule's dying was only the half of it. The deeper wound is that the men who kept them have lived to feel like foreigners in the country they built, carrying a courtesy nobody around them recognizes anymore, and getting looked at a little oddly for it when they slip and show it. Number 17. He kept his shoes shined and his collar clean on a working man's pay. My father had 2 good shirts and a flat tin of black polish, and on Sunday nights he sat at the kitchen table with a rag and a horsehair brush and worked those shoes until he could nearly see the lamp reflected in the toes. He was not vain. He could not have spelled the word. He just held that a man showed up for a woman looking like he had bothered because she would be bothering for him. The money was number 16, and how he handled it. He paid without making any production of the thing at all. He never held the bill up to the light or counted coins out onto the table. It simply changed hands while he was in the middle of saying something to her. This next one the women noticed first. My mother always said, before any of the grand gestures registered at all. Number 15. He walked her clear to the door and waited until she was inside before he turned for home. The curb was not good enough, and neither was the end of the front walk. He stood on the step until the latch caught and the porch light dimmed, and only then did he go. This next one a woman clocked early and never once told him she was watching for. Number 14. He never said one word against a woman he used to court. However it had ended with the last girl, whatever she had done to him, or he to her, he kept it behind his teeth. A man who ran down the last girl to you would one day run you down to the next one, and a woman did that arithmetic without anybody teaching it to her. Number 13 is the one that told you what a man was made of when he thought nobody important was watching. At every dance there was a woman standing along the wall, the one the music seemed to happen at a distance from. The man worth a damn put down his drink and crossed the entire floor to her. She was not the one he wanted, and that was exactly the point. He had decided, somewhere early in his life, that he was not going to be the kind of man who left a person standing alone against a wall while the band played out a whole song without them. He gave her one dance, and the simple dignity of having been asked walked her back to her place and made no fuss of it at all. And the girls he was not dancing with saw every second of it. It moved them more than anything he could have done facing them directly, because a woman reads her own future in what a man does for the people he stands to gain nothing from. Number 12. He looked at her and not at the room behind her. His eyes did not slide to the door every time it opened, did not go hunting over her shoulder for somebody more worth knowing. The next one sounds like the smallest thing on the whole list, and to a girl watching the clock from a front window, it was the furthest thing from small. Number 11. He came on time. To the minute, he said 7, and the knock landed at 7, not a quarter past, with an apology writing in front of it. Now I have to be honest about the cost of all this, because I knew these men, and not every part of it was noble. A good deal of the old caution was fear wearing the costume of manners, fear of the talk on the street, fear of a stern father, fear of putting a foot wrong in a town where everyone watched everyone else. And here is the part that has stayed with me my whole life. A lot of those men learned to say everything they felt with a held door and a shined shoe because they had never once been given permission to just say it out loud. I knew fellows who could court a woman like poetry and then sit beside her for 30 years and never tell her in plain words that they loved her. The gestures were beautiful. They were also a kind of cage, and I watched more than one good marriage go quiet and lonely inside it. In 1958, the town I grew up near had 4 dance halls going on a Saturday night, and a young man could meet 3 different girls between the first song and the last. There was a 4-piece band at the Polish Hall that played the same slow numbers in the same order every week, partly because they only knew so many, and partly so a nervous young man would know exactly what was coming and have the length of one waltz to work up his nerve and cross the floor before the next. By 1966, one of those halls was a bowling alley, one was shut and dark with the windows soaked over, and the other 2 had given the floor over to records and a new kind of dancing where you faced the whole room instead of one person. The twist did that, and the music that came up behind it through the early 60s. I am not blaming a song for all of it. But when the partners stopped touching, a boy lost the one place his father's entire education had been built for, the place where you had to walk up to a stranger, take her hand, hold her, and lead her around a floor without stepping on her. Every habit on this list had been learned for that floor or some smaller front room version of it. When the floor went, the school went, and nobody put up another one in its place. If any of this is landing, if you knew men like these, or you were raised by one, subscribe and sit a while with the rest of us who still remember it. I put one of these together every week, and there are more of these lost codes left to walk through than you would think, while there are still a few of us around who saw them with our own eyes. By the time I was old enough to do this part myself, the early 60s, it already felt a little old-fashioned, and I did it anyway. Number 10. He carried a clean-pressed handkerchief, and it was almost never for him. It was for the spilled soda, the sudden tears at a sad picture, the smudge on her white glove. He produced it without a word, asked for nothing back, and half the time never saw it again. A small thing brought for no reason is number 9. He brought it, and the smallness was the whole point. One flower, the kind a man stops for on a Wednesday because she crossed his mind, rather than a florist's dozen meant to stun her into something. A paper sack of the lemon drops she favored. A woman can tell a gift from a down payment every time. Number 8 is one almost no man can manage now, and the truth is most could not manage it then either. He could sit with her in a silence and feel no need at all to fill it. Most men chatter to paper over the quiet because an empty stretch of air feels to a nervous man like failing right there in front of her. The man who could let a silence sit easy between them and simply be there inside it with her was showing her something words cannot counterfeit. He was comfortable being known, with nothing to say and nowhere to hide behind a sentence. There were old couples in our parish who could sit on a porch through a whole summer evening and trade maybe 10 words between them, and you could feel, walking past, that the quiet was the thing they had built and not a thing they were enduring. A woman who has had men talk at her all her life will walk a very long way toward the one who can be quiet with her and not come apart. Number 7, he brought her into the room and made her belong there. He did not leave her stranded at the ragged edge of a circle of his friends like a coat hung on a hook by the door. He said her name out loud to every man there, handed them a thing or two about her to take hold of, and saw to it she had a place to stand and somebody to talk to before he ever drifted off himself. Keeping his word on the small things is number 6, and that is how she came to trust him with the large ones. If he said he would telephone on Thursday, the telephone rang Thursday. If he said he would mend the broken gate, the gate got mended. Watch what a man does with the little promises that nobody is checking up on, and you will know exactly what he will do with the big ones when everything is on the line. Number 5, he saw she was cold before she said a word, and his coat was already coming off his shoulders. He did not wait to be asked, because being asked would have meant she had to confess a need first, and he spared her even that. He just watched and caught the goose flesh on her arm, and the jacket was around her before the words got out. This next one is where a good many men hung themselves and never once knew they had done it. Number 4, he did not talk about himself, and he never once told her what he earned. The men who led with the job, the wage, the new Chevrolet shining at the curb, were the men driving home alone at the end of the night, and they went to their graves never understanding why. He let her find out who he was slowly, the way your eyes adjust to a dark room until the shapes come clear on their own. He had worked out, without ever putting it to himself this plainly, that a woman would rather be the most interesting person in the conversation than sit through a man being it at her. Number 3, he took the trouble to learn one thing she loved that meant nothing at all to him. The poem she read, the way her church did its singing, some matter of hers that had no earthly use to a man with grease worked deep into his knuckles. He learned a little of it, not to show that he had, but so he could meet her where she actually lived instead of forever making her come over to his side of things. That is rarer than gold, a man who will walk into your world on purpose with nothing in it for himself. Number 2, he turned square to her and let the whole room go. Other men kept one eye on the door and the band and whoever more important might walk in, but he gave her his face and his whole front, and the next hour, without rationing any of it, asked the follow-up to the follow-up until she forgot there was a crowd and made her feel like the only living soul in a room full of people. This is the one my mother meant, and it is the one that machinist in Kenosha had without anyone ever teaching it to him. I have come to think this is the thing a person hungers for more than almost anything else, more than to be admired, more than to be wanted, just to be the one thing in the room another person will not look away from. A woman could go an entire life and be given that 2 or 3 times if she was lucky in it, and she remembered every man who did it by name until the day she died, long after she had forgotten the ones who brought her diamonds. Number 1, take all of it away. Take the dance and the lifted hat and the held door, the shined shoes, the arm offered on the ice, the one flower on a Wednesday. Strip every last gesture off this list and set the whole pile aside. What is left underneath, the thing all 29 of those were only ever a way of carrying across a room, is that he was genuinely interested in her, in what she thought and what she had seen and who she was on the ordinary days when no man was courting her at all. Every other habit was just a way of getting that one thing close enough that she could feel it land on her, and it could never be faked, not for long, which is exactly why the whole code worked the way it did. A woman always knew, in the end, whether a man was performing his interest in her or actually had it down in him somewhere real, and no amount of polish ever fooled her for good. The dance and the hat and the letter were only ever there to carry the genuine thing across all that distance to where she stood. The men who knew how to do all this are very nearly gone now. They never wrote a word of it down, because to them it was not knowledge to be written. It was only how a decent man carried himself around a woman he hoped he might deserve. It passed from a father to a son on a kitchen floor on a Sunday night. It passed from the old hands on a shop crew to the green boy who stood watching them. It passed from a mother telling her boy to get on his feet when a lady came into the room. When those men went down into the ground, nearly all of it went with them, the way a language dies out for good when the last few people who spoke it stop saying the words aloud, and no one thinks to write them down until there is no one left to ask. The men who learned to be men on a dance floor were the last who had the whole of it.